Hey everybody, I'm Gilad Goldstein and I'm here with Kenra Professional. Today I'm going to walk you through how to achieve the rounded beveled bob. Now this bob is characterized with a nice round bevel towards the ends and just a little bit of layering that's just enough to get a really beautiful shape. So if you're ready to get started, grab your notebook, get a mannequin, and let's do this haircut. To kick off this rounded beveled bob, we're going to start with the hair wet. I want to get a precision haircut going in here and create that shape, and then we're going to refine it when it's dry. Before I start, I'm using some of my favorite Kenra Platinum Curl Detangler. And I always prep my haircuts with this spray because it provides a lot of moisture and gives an even saturation to the hair, which will get me even results. Starting with sectioning, we're going to place the comb on top of the head, and where it lifts off is the high point. From the high point, I'm going to take a vertical parting down to the ear to split the front and back. We're going to start the haircut in the back, so we're going to set the baseline by taking a horizontal parting in the nape. So I've taken a horizontal parting to separate the nape from the rest of the hair. This is going to be where we cut our baseline. So we're going to cut it to about the base of the neck. Now, with this rounded bob, you can go shorter or you can go longer. I find that the key is really making sure that the baseline is strong and that the layering is not too high. So a tip to get a really strong baseline is to have the client with their head up straight, comb the grain of the hair down with the fine teeth of the comb to make sure it's nice and consistent. What we want to do then is you can switch to the wide teeth. Comb the hair down into natural fall. Use the shear to push it down even further so that there's no elevation on the hair, and then make your cut. Now you're going to want to move your body around as you cut the baseline. If we stay in the same position as we're cutting this baseline, we're going to have a very uneven line because we'll be pulling the hair away from its natural fall. So what you want to do is always stand in front of your section, and remember, use the fine teeth of the comb to comb the hair nice and smooth, and then the wide teeth to grab the hair with no tension, and then make your first cut. Now when the hair is combed down, because we have no elevation, you'll see that it easily cups in. You'll know that you created layers if when you comb this hair out, it starts to flick. So if you can easily comb that hair down so that it cups in, that's how you know you create a really strong weight line for the haircut. To start the layering, we're going to divide the right and left sides. Once you have the hair parted off, you're going to take another horizontal parting. Personally, I like to take the partings on each side as I go. That way I'm cutting the same amount of hair as I work my way up the section. I find that if you do one side and then do the other side, you get a more even result versus doing the whole side completely and then moving on to the other side. This helps us maintain that consistency through the entire bob. Cut such a strong baseline, we already have a guide for our layering. I'm going to take this hair and we're going to comb it into our baseline, and we're going to elevate it slightly, just a little bit, and then connect to the baseline. Now, the reason we're elevating the hair just a little bit is to create that slight layering at the very bottom of the section. So the higher you elevate the hair, the more layering you're going to create. But since this is a bob, we know we want it to have a really strong feeling towards the ends. So we want to keep our elevation low. That's why you'll see me not elevating the hair any more than 45 degrees. I would say this is even less than 45 degrees. You just want to lift it up slightly, connect it to the length to create a little bit of graduation in your layers. I'm also blunt cutting right now because we need to make sure that we can see our guide as we cut. Point cutting is great, but there's a risk that we won't be able to see the strength in our line. So we're going to do blunt cuts until we reach the top, and then we'll start to shift to point cutting. Pay close attention because things are about to change. I'm going to take a small amount of hair from the previous section as a guide. So we're not using the very bottom as a guide anymore. Now we're using the previous section. Remember to keep your elevation really low because we don't want to raise it any higher than 45 degrees. And note that we're pulling this hair to the previous section, not to the bottom. So you're taking a small amount of hair from the previous section as a guide, combing your subsection into the guide, elevating very low, and cutting your line. What this has done is it's built a little bit more graduation that's going to continue to round as we work up the head. So I'm going to continue working my way all the way up the back until we've completed this cut. We've reached the last section on top, so make sure one more time, we're just gonna pull it to the previous section and finish your layering. It might seem like a lot of work just to create a very low layer, but creating the graduation this way bit by bit, make sure that it's really smooth and seamless. So I know you've seen those bobs where it feels extremely heavy and almost bulbous in the back. This is a really great way to achieve that rounded look without it feeling too thick or too wide. It's gonna give a really beautiful shape. Now, as we're combing it, you can see that roundness that's naturally happening at the bottom of the haircut. And that's because of that graduation that we put in by elevating the hair to the previous section, very low, bit by bit. Now we have a nice smooth transition. Now we're gonna connect the sides. Start with a 1-inch parting that's slightly diagonal towards the face. Make sure to clip the rest of the hair out of the way. We want to continue creating graduation, so we're going to find our guide from the back, and that's going to be the guide for our length. For this first section, keep the elevation at 0. We want to just set in our baseline, so you're going to comb to the guide and set in your baseline at no elevation. You can see how it connects from the back to the front. Now we can start layering. We're going to work our way up the section, taking 1-inch diagonal sections that mirror that first parting, using the previous section as a guide. And just like we did in the back, we're going to continue working our way up, using the previous section as a guide, keeping a low elevation and creating a smooth, graduated shape. Now you could do this on longer hair if you wanted and get a really beautiful round result in a long shape as well. But you're going to see this roundness really well on a bob because that length sits at the collarbone, sits at the neck, and it just showcases how that hair cups in and gradually builds the volume as it works towards the top. But yeah, this could be on any length of hair, so if you like this technique, feel free to try it on longer hair as well. To make it easier on yourself, take the previous section before you start combing down your next. That's going to give you that consistent guide that you can follow as you cut and create your layers in the front. And I'm only cutting to my second knuckle, not cutting past it. When I think of a rounded bob, I'm always thinking of something that isn't super layered and has that feeling of like a bevel towards the end. So just make sure that you're not lifting the hair really high because that's going to cause too much layering in the shape. And remember, when we're setting our baseline, start with the fine teeth of the comb. So I find they create the most amount of tension so I can get an even combing of the hair. And then the wide teeth actually releases the tension and disperses it closer to natural fall. So if you've ever cut your length or your baseline and you've had full tension with the fine teeth, you know what tends to happen is that it pops up and you get a lot of inconsistencies in your length. So making sure to understand when to use the fine teeth versus when to use the wide teeth is going to really set you apart as someone who has a really strong understanding of how to create a really great bob. Now, before I get too far up this other side, I'm just going to look at the front view and I'm going to check the balance. So it's feeling pretty balanced so far, so I'm gonna keep working my way up. But you can also work side to side if it's easier for you to maintain consistency. Just make sure that you're checking for balance as you work your way up so you don't have to do the haircut all over again because it's uneven at the end. And I'm taking my previous section before I even comb the hair down and then combing it over my fingers. So you can see by doing that, we were able to grab the hair that we're going to cut. Now I can ignore what's underneath and build the graduation from the previous guide. If you look really close, you'll be able to see your guide through the hair. You want to make sure to pick up enough hair that you can see the guide, and that way you're able to connect your layers seamlessly. I don't think there's like a fear of cutting bobs, but one thing that I've found is that people have a fear of creating graduation and layering. One of the bigger challenges that we run into whenever we're creating a layered bob is making sure that it doesn't look chunky or, a little bit blocky and disconnected. So working in these kind of sections makes it really easier to control what you're doing in the bob haircut. You're kind of breaking it up bit by bit, and that way you're not going to have a lot of inconsistencies. So when you dry, you don't have any weird surprises like a giant chunk in the back of the head. But I think it's really about being patient. Whenever you're doing a bob haircut, you kind of want to be really patient because this is one of those precision haircuts that can either look really bad or really, really good. Like you don't want to be the one that cuts a bob and it just looks cheap or uneven. So take your time, be patient, cut a really beautiful shape, and get a strong foundation before you do any sort of styling. And I'm gonna comb my bob back into shape. I'm gonna look from the front. We're gonna check for balance. Now to make sure everything is even, I'm gonna take these two front pieces. We're gonna comb them down. And you're going to see if there's any inconsistencies in your length. So it's looking pretty good from out here. It does get slightly longer to the front. It's actually pretty even as far as I can tell. I'm just gonna nip this slightly just for good measure. And now our bob haircut is ready to be dried. We've completed this foundation of the haircut while the hair is wet. So we have our precise shape. We've built a little bit of graduation and bevel in the back. Now I'm gonna go in with some products to style the hair, and then we're gonna do some dry cutting to perfect the texture. I'm gonna apply some of the Kenra Volume Mousse to the hair while it's damp. This is gonna set us up for the blow dry. It's gonna give a lot of shape to the hair, so when we round brush it, we're able to get that bevel. So without the mousse, there's a risk that the hair is not going to hold its shape, especially when we round brush. So I wanna make sure to really focus this mousse towards the mid-lengths and the ends. That way, when I heat it up and brush it, it can really take on the shape of the brush and get that beautiful bevel. So we just finished blow drying the bob, and as you can see, we have a really beautiful rounded shape all the way through. Now, if you look closely at the back, you'll notice that there's not a very hard line anywhere. And that's because we took those small subsections and worked our way up so we could really create this bevel that has a very seamless transition from the ends to the top. Now, on any bob haircut, there's a chance that there might be little baby hairs that are kind of flicking out from the neck. So the first thing we want to do is just refine those. In the salon, I always ask my guests to tilt their head down. This gives us a much better view of any little hairs that are hanging at the bottom that we need to nip away. Once you find any stray hairs, go ahead and nip those off. And we cut a pretty clean, even baseline here, so there's not too much to cut off in this perimeter end. But if the hair is much shorter, you'll notice when you push the hair flat, there might be a few hairs around the hairline that you'll have to clean up. So that's gonna vary based on the client that you're working with. Now that we've refined the ends, we're gonna go through and really soften out any of the heavy weight. So because we created such a clean cut, we're not gonna have to do too much, but I'm gonna take subsections. We're gonna find the cutting line. And once you find that line, just go ahead and do a soft little point cut. So you can work your way from top to bottom. I'm just gonna take my sections, working to cut away any of these blunt lines and create a softer appearance to the end. Keep in mind that as we're doing this cut, we're not looking to extremely texturize the hair to the point that it becomes a completely new shape. We did a really nice job creating a clean, rounded, beveled shape in this bob. So all I want to do at this point is just make sure that the lines of graduation that I cut are soft and blended. I'm looking, and if there are any really heavy points that feel very solid, that's where I'm doing a deep parallel point cut to take that weight away. You can also comb the hair and see how it's flowing. So if it feels very heavy in a spot, that tells you where you might want to pick the hair back up and do a little bit more point cutting. But just make sure that whatever you're cutting is controlled. So comb that hair, look for the cutting line, and if you see solid weight, you can go ahead and point cut that away. And I'm just looking through here at the ends. Where I see it's a little bit solid, I'm just gonna hold the hair low where we cut it, so it's at a low elevation. Now you see this hair at the ends is very solid, so it feels heavy right now. That's fine, and we love that, but we want to just soften that out a little bit. So if you look closely at the subsection here, you'll see there's a little bit of space happening right at the back, and then it feels very solid in the front. This is a place where we can do a little bit of that texturizing. So I'm going to look for that solid line, and I'm holding my shear parallel to the strand, softening that line out. Make sure to keep all of the length. So at certain points, you might want to comb the hair away just to see what you've cut, and that'll tell you if you need to cut anything else. Now, if you want to work this hair from bottom to top, comb the hair back, drop out a section, and clip. Now you have your working section to texturize. So I'm combing the hair down to a low elevation and just checking on the weight that we created in the haircut. You can see that really solid line right there. Beautiful, but I'm just going to soften it right out. So a little bit of parallel point cutting just to take the edge off of that line. Make sure that as you're texturizing, you're not over texturizing the same subsection. So as I drop that hair on top, I'm going to go back in and just comb out the hair that I need to cut. We want to do this technique on the dry hair because we can actually see the density that we're cutting. So imagine if the hair was wet while you were doing this, it's all condensed. When the hair is wet, it just kind of creeps together, so you don't have a really good read on the actual density that you're working with. Whenever you're texturizing, you want to work on dry hair in order to see what the cutting lines are, what the actual weight is that we want to remove, and if the hair is fine, what we want to leave. Sometimes you don't want to do this texturizing technique, especially if the guest has really fine or flat hair. This can actually cause it to feel even thinner. So make sure that you're really customizing this result to the client that you're working with. For the back, we're just going to work in the top sections of the hair. So take a small amount of hair, hold it nice and low, and point cut that weight. You can drop out some of the hair you cut and continue releasing weight to the top. As you work to the top, there's going to be less hair to cut because you've already texturized, and that's going to create a nice seamless amount of weight removal in the back. So once again, I'm just picking up the hair, holding it at a low elevation. You can see the cutting line. We're going to parallel point cut to soften that out. And then watch as we drop some of that hair and continue texturizing towards the top. Now, I love this technique for a graduated bob, but I also think it's a great technique just to remove weight in general. So you can use this if you're doing a wolf cut, if you're doing any sort of feathered haircut, to create a little bit of softness in the edge so that when it's styled, you have a little bit more movement in the layers without it feeling choppy. Yeah, so you can see on this top section, the hair is much less dense. So because we texturize from the bottom up, there's a little bit less to do as we find our way to the top. So we finished styling the rounded beveled bob. As you can see, it has a really nice shape because of the graduation we did. So just by lifting to the previous section, we were able to get this nice rounded shape. I used a curling iron just to heat style it to get a small bend in the front, and then just enhance that roundness by using the iron and letting the hair sit so it could really take on that curved shape. So thank you for following along with this rounded beveled bob. Let me know in the comments what you thought and if you learned something really cool. And if you really like this video, follow Kenra Professional for more, and I'll see you in the next one.